Welcome to the next breakthrough with Sean Campbell. This is the show where we share insights from business leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators on business leadership and the evolving role of AI. Today's guest is David Cohn. He's a longtime media and innovation leader at Advanced Local. He started off as a technology reporter, moved into product and newsroom innovation, and has spent the past decade helping drive AI adoption across his organization, including building hundreds, I think it's over 300 to 400 agents now, probably more you can tell us about, and workflows as well. So automation. So David, great to have you here. Thanks for participating in this, joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What is Advanced Local exactly?
Sure. Advanced Local is a local media organization. It's the sister company to Condé Nast and the Condé Nast magazines, which a lot of people know, the New Yorker, Vanity Fair, Wired. That same family-owned company also owns and started with actually local papers. So the first one was the Staten Island Advance paper in Staten Island, but they also are the New Jersey Star Ledger, the Cleveland Plain Times Dealer, the Oregonian in Portland, Oregon. In about 9 markets across the United States, they're like the local news provider. I work on the Advanced Local side, the news side.
Your role is quite, I don't know if it's a unique role, but we're starting to see more and more people take on roles like yours within their internal organizations. I'd call them like entrepreneurs that are starting to bring AI in and find use cases for it. Can you tell us specifically about your role and what you do at Advanced Local?
Yeah, in fact, entrepreneur is a good way to put it in some respects. I've been on the research and development team at Advanced Local for a long time. And during that time, I was actually not working with the local newsrooms. I was specifically working outside of them, building things like something called Subtext, which is a SaaS company in its own right now. When AI started, hitting about 2.5 years ago, they sort of said, actually, we want you to keep that same sort of spirit of not having to necessarily go through the same bureaucracy that you might experience in a newsroom, but we do want you to bring it to the newsrooms, right? And so, I lead AI efforts specifically for content in the newsroom, and sometimes I work outside of content in newsrooms, but really we're looking at what are the ways that we can get our newsrooms to adopt this technology, embrace it, and leverage it in as fast a way as possible. And so I'm a little bit of a tip of the spear on trying to figure out what are the newest interesting ways that we can really do this, because it's important for a legacy organization to always have that spirit of being willing to disrupt ourselves. um, and AI is a kind of technology that, if you don't adopt, will someone else will disrupt you. So it's really important for us to embrace that first.
Every leader out there is obviously looking at AI as something that's impacting strategy. They're thinking about how does it impact the operating model? How is every company going to operate going forward? And I had this term, well, it's not my term, but like your skunk works, right? You kind of go out, you find the people that would be the disruptors who would disrupt your company before someone else will, your competitor. So it sounds like you're kind of in a skunk works group and you have free reign to go around and try to find ways to optimize process or maybe blow up the process and make it completely different and better.
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct. And that is the way I think of it. And again, AI is going to hit every part of the company, right? And I'll use HR as an example, sort of different from myself focusing on content in the newsrooms. Do we need to invent and really own how AI changes HR for our company? No, right? Like there are vendors out there, they're going to figure it out. There are startups out there that are, that are going to maybe disrupt the more traditional HR vendors, right? And that's fine. We're willing to sort of keep an eye on it and see who gives us the best advantage. But again, for something that is our differentiator, the journalism, the news, and the content, right? Like that's not something that we just want to wait and see who comes up with a great solution. That's the differentiator. It's like, what do you want to do skunk works on, right? You better make sure it's the thing that most matters to you as a business.
So it's your core processes, your core business is what you're focused on. The things that you would typically start to outsource, maybe, um, that's probably areas where someone probably is going to spend all of their dedicated time doing that, like a SaaS product, like let's say Salesforce, for example, right? They're in CRM, sales and service and marketing. They're probably going to go deep into that with Agent Force, ServiceNow and ITSM, like just various companies are going to go very deep. And I think it'd be quite challenging for internal companies to have that amount of focus and R&D resources. Like actually team members dedicated to improving that area. Even if you have the technology that can technically do it, you can go vibe code and you can build stuff in Claude. But do you want to actually become that software company around that area? And I think
Exactly.
what you're saying is extremely important. Every leader has to decide, like, I only have so many people on so much budget and a lot of priorities. And do you want to actually go into, for example, HR and start building out an HR solution? Maybe not. You probably want to focus on the area, like you said, your core business.
Yeah. Another way to put it is like there's that classic question of build versus buy, and the math on that is changing a little bit. And I
Mm,
think it's fine to recognize that the math changes on that, but at the same time, just because the price of building has maybe dropped a little bit, doesn't mean you should chase every single squirrel, right? To use the classic dog squirrel, right? Like, and I see things sometimes that we're like talking to, and I'm like, ooh, we could build that, and it's like, you know
should
there
you?
still is only so much that we really need to own and should focus on. And could we build, a really terrible version of some Salesforce type thing? Yeah, we probably could, but like one, it won't be as good. And it'd be a lot cheaper, but it's not going to be as good. But it'd be cheaper to build than it would have been before. And ultimately, again, Salesforce is, I think, right, still going to have the solutions, and maybe they end up lowering their cost because there's so much competition from vibe coded things, and we'd still benefit from that without even having to lift a finger, right? Again, I think there is the calculations around build versus buy changes, but if anything, I think that means you need to really think critically and be even more disciplined about it.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at my LinkedIn feed, and granted, I'm probably in the AI bubble of LinkedIn feed AI stuff. You see everybody's vibe coding everything, or there a lot of people who are technical and non-technical are getting very involved. I think sometimes people get quite intimidated. They hear, AI and they go, "Oh, well, that's quite techy. I'm not really a person that would be involved in that." What's your background? Were you a developer in the past, or like, how did you get involved in kind of AI to start
No,
off with?
and I mean, again, what I often would say when it comes to AI, like I could program at like a second grade level. Like I was just good enough to
Is this
break things.
second grader now or second grader 10 years ago? Because
I
like,
mean,
you're quite skilled.
I would never be called an engineer or even a developer. I was good enough to break anything you gave me. I actually got my start in journalism, and I was a technology reporter, right? So, and it was as a technology reporter, and I think part of it was the timing, it was the early web. I ended up transitioning first to like maybe project management and then eventually product management, and like worked on some media slash technology startups and things like that, and got more and more interested and involved in the sort of technology side of it. One way that I put it is in media, there's something called and a lot of organizations, the content management system. And I've sort of built and designed many CMSs now over the years. And I still get editorial sort of fulfillment from that because I say that the CMS is your first editor. And so I like to still think of myself as working in journalism, although I'm not a journalist. I work on the product side of it and create and define the tools that allow journalists to do their jobs. And it is obviously, been doing that for, 15 plus years and gained more and more technical skills, but at by no stretch was I ever an engineer, or would I have called myself that. I still wouldn't, but again, I'm actually in the sweet spot, I think, of able to take the most advantage of these AI tools, right? Because like someone, I think if you have no understanding of computers and kind of how they function and what a terminal is and all that, there still is a little bit of a gap there for you. I have, some basic understanding of that. And now the level of lift I get is way more than an engineer, right? I mean, an engineer was able to do some of, like they're still getting lift. It's much more on speed, right? I'm getting both speed and capacity expansion. Right. Like I'm benefiting more than anybody else, I think, or people in the same sort of space that I was in. Because again, making an application, I wouldn't have done that before. I would have maybe have done some scaffolding at best, but now I'm able to sort of pump it out and look at it and kind of understand what's going on. I still rely on actually more experienced engineers and developers to look at it, especially if you're looking at anything enterprise, right? Security concerns, privacy concerns, all that good stuff. I'm not pushing anything that's going to go live, and nor would I recommend that for vibe coding, right? But I'm able to get ideas into a tangible space now faster and easier than ever before. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard, but it really is mind blowing.
It seems like the feedback loops are much faster now, right? You can come up with a prototype or proof of concept or something, show it to a business user, have them look at it, give you feedback, and you can iterate very quickly. But it still goes back to that question of, do you build it internally, which people get very excited about, the first prototype, but then you start talking, if you're in the enterprise, about things like, well, are you going to actually productize that thing? Is it going to be, where is it going to be hosted? What about the data? This, all of that detail that the big companies worry about. So for when you started like working in that kind of area where you started to introduce, some of these AI tools from a leadership perspective within your company that you work at, it was a very top-down driven sort of initiative, or did it naturally kind of bubble up from the bottom, and then it could kind of convince leaders and showcase them? Because once you're like a lot of leaders at the very top in the organizations, depending how big they are, start to get maybe less hands-on in those sort of tools, right? They've got people updating them and reports and dashboards, and they may not be in the weeds of knowing what the latest, greatest prototyping technique is. And so how did it work out with your situation?
I'm really lucky that again it's a large company, but it's still family owned, and the C-suite is very plugged in, and again has that idea of disrupting themselves, and they wanted from the beginning to have someone leading this effort. So it comes from the top, but I also think you cannot do this without buy-in and without everyone from the very bottom up getting on board as well. One of the earliest things that I discovered was what I could do was kind of show what was possible. Um, but to know what to build had to come from, you know, the people, the boots on the ground, the folks doing the real work, right? And so it's been an interesting and really productive dance of, hey, I'm showing like here's something, and look at the different ways that we can build things and start to manipulate things and do stuff. And then people would say, that's pretty cool, but you know what I really need is X, Y, or Z. And so there's a little bit of a chicken and an egg there that I think has to happen. I think someone has to move first, either, and we have gotten ideas out of nowhere from all parts of the company. Another early initiative was we created an open, call, right? Like you can submit your ideas. It kind of comes through. Folks look at it. We make sure that different parts of the company, we are working on it or a vendor's working on it, or actually that's a brand new idea. We really need to discuss this. So some ideas come out of nowhere. Or again, I think a lot of it has been showing, just being willing to take the risk of like, here's something we built. Again, not as hard as it used to be to build something. We're not saying this is it, but like, what's your reaction? And again, creating that feedback loop. And now it's not a feedback loop around a concept. It's a feedback loop around a real product. Does this help you do your job? Does it make it faster, easier, better? Right. And then they say, again, often it is almost or 20%, but what would make it 30% is this. And then we can have that back and forth conversation again, a lot faster. Right. I mean, it's really is the classic stuff that businesses have been doing for, you know, for all of history. But like you just said, right, that feedback loop is now so much faster because even when you went from, this is now ancient history, like waterfall project management to iterative, right? This is like iterative on steroids. I mean, like that loop has now really started spinning. It doesn't work without buy-in from the top, but you also won't get anywhere if you can't get that feedback. If you don't get the buy-in again from everyone saying yes or no to whatever the movement that takes place.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying there's that cultural aspect that, you're talking about waterfall and agile. Yet companies sometimes operate in a culture where everything needs to be known up front before we start developing anything. Like we don't want to risk missing something. We need to talk to every stakeholder, get it all down on paper somewhere. A couple months later, that requirements document is probably out of date anyway because the business processes change, market conditions have changed, whatever. You also have on the other side more of an agile environment where people are more innovative, they're open, the culture encourages, like you said, ideas to come in, and people have a bit of a structured innovation, I would call it, where you do have some sort of process to manage that. So can you tell me a little bit about how you manage that particular piece in terms of gathering the ideas and deciding like what should be AI assisted, or what stays more human?
I feel really lucky in that because we have 9 different newsrooms And again, because of the history of it, each newsroom is a little different. They're, I mean, there's a big company, but each one is kind of gets its own space to own and operate it in the way that they feel best. I work with all of them, and so I kind of have 9 different places where experiments can happen. So whereas before, an organization might be able to again do that iteration on one thing really quickly, we have at least nine, if not 18 or more, right, happening, and then they cross pollinate, right? Because what happens in New Jersey, Oregon doesn't necessarily need to know about right away, right? Once it starts proving itself in Jersey, then, that's where there is a challenge of communication, essentially, of like making sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing across all the markets. But we're able to get started in certain respects without making sure everybody is on board across the entire company. I just need to make sure that the stakeholder in that specific newsroom is on board. Um, the other element to it is, there's still, even with all that, there's more things to do than can be done. And so, early days, it was very much, what is the quick, fast, and like easily ROIable kind of thing. And I think we've gotten a lot of that. One thing that I've said, and this goes to the agents, we've built probably close to 500 now of what I call cron jobs, which are these agents that, and this is, you'll hopefully see the value for newsrooms right away. It's an agent that goes to a local government website and looks and examines it and compares it to the last time we looked at it. Oh, I see that there's a new city council agenda that's been released. Takes a note of that and sends an alert to the reporter. Or, sometimes it's, oh, that's the same city council agenda as last time I was here yesterday. Nothing to report back to the reporter. But this way, again, if you're a beat reporter and you're trying to keep track of different things, whether it's, what's happening at the local civic center, the library, the city council, right? So we have 500 different agents. They look at everything from events that might be happening that weekend at bars to, again, city council meeting minutes. I think of that as like, the bottom of the pyramid in terms of value, right? And we've done a lot of that. We've captured a lot of that. Now we need to start talking about what is the next value proposition that goes up and up and up further. And again, sometimes that's a discovery process, right? Once you've got that foundation, it's sort of like, okay, reporters, you're now got the feed, right? What's the next thing that we need? We need AI manipulation on top of that, so that when I get it, I can do this and that or whatever. Right? So we've done a really good job, I think, of the base of our value proposition now. And my goal for 2026 is to like see how much further up the value chain we can go.
So you started off with maybe, a manual, somebody clicks something, it goes and does some summarization, kind of the interaction with a LLM like ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. It's a very basic. I ask something, gives me an answer. That's level one. Then you go to the next level where it's maybe monitoring something on your behalf, and then starts to email you summaries and different alerts. And then now you're jumping to like the next level, which is I'm gonna stitch together some of these things. I guess is that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Like the next level is going to be, okay, those updates, not only are they emailed to the reporter, but they're also put in our own little database, right? And from that database, again, now I can log into a place and see all of my updates. I might be able to do searches, again, agentic searches, which allow me to maybe stitch these together. Like, hey, I see that this is the update for this city council meeting, but what's happened to the last 6 council meetings? Because I've got them all stored now in this database. Or, you know what? I just want to focus on this one. And then again, some kind of AI manipulation on top of that, right? Like give it, again, I always use the joke of give it to me as a haiku, right? Which I know the journalists don't want, but like, what I usually use that as the example to impress upon people. It's like, you tell me how you want it, right? Like, let me know what is the most useful. I can give this to you at bullet points. I can, give it you a first draft. I can give you a haiku, right? You tell me what you need. And often, again, that's different for different reporters. So while I am often standardizing it because it's just easier for me across all those 500 agents, right? Sometimes I'll, if I get specific requests, but eventually, again, higher up the value chain, they should be able to do that themselves. They should be able to determine what's the best format for them.
You want to have a culture where you're enabling ideas and innovation to come in. How much education did you have to give people up front? Or did you educate them while you were kind of impressing upon them the art of the possible, showing them something and giving them value right away versus let me teach you about AI in general? What was the kind of the journey for you?
That's a really good question, and I'll add to it. In addition to education, there's also policies, right? Because there is a way to use AI totally incorrectly in a newsroom, right? I mean, this is in journalism, right? Like, there are a lot of
A
things that
lot
we
of
don't
trust involved in journalism, right? And
exactly, right?
generate content so easily now that it could
Right.
be anything.
So in addition to educating what's possible, we had a robust conversation, and this was across all markets. We had leaders from every market sort of, come up with our policies. Part of which was, by the way, these are our policies for the next 6 months, and we will revisit because, like, who knows? Not to say that we're going to throw them out, but, like, this is a moving space, right? I think everybody can agree to that. And so while we're educating on here are the tools and how to use them, it was also why do we use them and what's the right way to use them, et cetera, et cetera. And that had to be baked into any internal tooling that we created for them, right? So that they are aware of it. Documentation is tough, right? And even with AI helping, you still get questions of like, well, how do I use this? What's the right way to use this? Sometimes I see uses and I'm like, let's keep this in mind. I mean, again, by design right now, and maybe this will never change, I don't know, all of our AI manipulations or whatever happen outside of the content management system. And that's on purpose because the content management system is where you hit publish, right? So a human has to copy it from one place and paste it, and that human is responsible. And so that's the human in the loop. That's so that our AI is not hooked into our CMS, I believe, is a feature, not a bug. Will that always be the case? I don't know, right? I mean, in 10 years from now, AI will maybe just be, assumed to be baked into everything. But those are decisions that you have to make in terms of that reflect the policy that you want to enforce.
A lot of workers are worried about AI kind of reducing the value of the work and replacing the part of them that makes them good at their jobs. Like, what are you learning over there, and how people can adapt or adopt AI without creating panic or, getting people disengaged or even sabotaging efforts?
I love this question because in media and journalism, a lot of people are nervous. I am actually really bullish. I actually think AI will create more journalism jobs than it destroys. And it may destroy some, but I think it will end up creating more. The analogy I often use is the ATM. When the ATM was first invented, a lot of bank tellers thought they were going to lose their jobs. And what ended up happening is the cost of opening up new branches dropped dramatically. And so, whereas, you probably, if you're in a small town somewhere, you might have seen where there was one big bank, this big, old, beautiful building. Today, that same town may have 10 banks, and each bank employs people, right? So now you end up with a net increase, right, of total employees, even though they're distributed. And when I look at media, right, how many towns are there that are uncovered? Because historically, the cost of covering a town, let's say a town of 50,000 people, you would have needed 10 people, maybe 15 to really cover a town of 50,000. And that has a lot of cost. But with AI, maybe only 2 people are needed to cover a town of 50,000. In which case, are there 2 entrepreneurial journalists who will go in and cover that town and make a great living doing it? I think so. And I think in net, as more and more of these sort of, I'll use two as the, a 2-person team, as more of those 2-person teams fill in the market, you'll end up with more journalists. Maybe not all at the New York Times, maybe not all at CNN. I'll use CNN as the example. CNN is that big, beautiful bank. Is the big, beautiful bank the same? No. The big, beautiful bank, right, kind of does decrease, but there are more banks now, right? Essentially, AI opens up new markets. And if we serve those markets well, they'll sustain those people that serve those new markets. So I actually, again, I am not, and nor is my directive to like figure out tools that replace our journalists. That's not our goal. We are looking at how can we find new markets? Can we serve new markets with these tools? How do we actually grow using these tools? And, if we are able to, for example, and we have experiments on this, like can 2 people cover a county, right? If we and these are counties that we, had previously, not covered. And if we can do that, we'll do that all day, right? We'll just hire more and more journalists and cover more and more counties that are kind of ignored right now. So again, I totally get the concern, and there is definitely a dystopian sci-fi that we can all imagine where, like, certainly there's no work. But I think if it happens for our industry, it's happened for all industries, and we're in big trouble. The last thing I would say, and again, I apologize for hopefully not ranting too much. The value then for a journalist, I'll use journalism as the thing, is to lean into the human part of it, which sounds a little cliche, but like, what are they good at? They're good at producing content. What are they not good at? Reporting. And there's a distinction there, right? The reporter is the person who goes to City Hall, reads the room, understands the nuance between, oh, the mayor doesn't like the treasurer, and they had a fight last week, and I see this person over there, kind of rolling their eyeballs at this, right? Reporting is about human relationships and understanding what's going on in a community and being a trusted person in that community. I don't see AI taking that spot anytime soon. Can we imagine it? Yes, but again, that's a real different world. But I think, what I would tell anybody in any industry, and especially with journalists, it's like, what's the most human thing in your industry, right? What's the most human thing that you do? Zone in on that. And for us, it's reporting. It's being there and like being the person that a community trusts, so that you can hear the things that are not, not data on the web, and also so you can understand the nuance between people. And
I
and I
recently
think there's something like that in every.
Yeah, I recently watched an interview of the CEO of LinkedIn, and he was being talking about what are the skills that people need. They said, yes, technical skills are kind of foundational. Yeah, those are important. But as AI, develops better capabilities and it's innovating, like I think it's like every 4 to 6 months now, it's like doubling in capabilities, just exponentially. They would say technical skills are good, but the software engineering skills obviously are a lot of code is being written by AI now. So what's the differentiator? It's really those exactly what you go to. It's the human skills of relationship building and empathy and trust and how to communicate and all those things that are, I would say, more the non-technical side. The soft skills side. He says, not they're not really soft. They're actually absolutely necessary. And I think the more that people realize exactly, I like the way you put it. Maybe one of your principles is think about in your workflow, in your business, what is the most human part? That's probably going to be the thing that differentiates your company from some another company. Because if everybody can technically get everything easy through the use of AI, what's the difference then? Yeah, it becomes
Yeah.
transactional at that point.
Right. I mean, and again, it's like I think about sales as well, right? Like, because we were talking about, so much of sales is supported by different SaaS things, right? And if the cost of all the SaaS drops, whether it's Gong or Otter, or, all the different softwares that a good salesperson uses, those used to be relied on as an advantage, right? But it won't be, right? Because even someone just starting out, again, maybe they don't get 100% of all the different software, but they can get 90%. So now the real differentiator is going to be their ability to really do the sort of classic Wolf on Wall Street sales, right? The like, sell me this pen, right? And AI doesn't do that, right? That's the most human part of that. And I think again, I think there's something like that for most jobs.
So if you could design like one AI capability that doesn't exist today, what do you think it would that would kind of materially improve how leaders would think, decide, and act within their organizations? What do you think that would be?
I'll tell you something that's been on my mind, and I don't know if it totally answers your question, but hopefully it's acceptable, which is like, you know, I remember the early web when it felt like serendipity. I mean, I remember the first time I played on Twitter and I was like, this is amazing. What is this great experience, right? And I think a little bit of serendipity left the web, well, a lot of serendipity left the web. Um, and rather than engaging with people back and forth, it got mediated by algorithms. And I think eventually it was those algorithms, which is a kind of AI to be fair, but I think the algorithms sort of sucked the joy out of the social part of the internet. Whereas the social part of the internet had this moment where it's like, wow, the internet is social. I'm meeting people here. And I think there's a belief that AI closes it even more, right? It mediates it even more to the point where it's like, I'm never going to talk to Sean or anybody else. I'm going to only my AI. And I would really love to see an AI that mediates back that social serendipity, that brings back the ability for me to be connected with someone else. An AI that, again, brings a little bit of something I didn't expect from someone else in the world into my feed in a way. I don't totally know what that looks like, and I don't know if there's anybody working on that necessarily. But again, I think about media and journalism, and there was a moment where, and we still do, right? We see ourselves as in service to a community, and a community. What is journalism and news? It allows a community to speak to itself. That's one way that I like to think of it. And that can happen through articles and news, right? That allows you to understand what are the important things, but it also is what allows community members to meet and greet and talk to each other. And again, I worry that maybe it will be the case, and I worry we assume that AI strips even more of that away. But I would love to see an AI that allows a group of people to all, I'll say the word, message the AI about the same topic, and then we each get back something that is a little bit richer because it's been pollinated by everybody else's contributions. Again, I don't know if there's anything like that right now or people working on it, but that's something I would love to see.
Great. Now that's good. Let's see where things develop. You never know. Things are changing so quickly. That thing might be out tomorrow. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Innovation so quick. So finally, if you were going to advise, either a CEO in a corporate environment, or, it could even be an entrepreneur who's got a small team of 20 or 50, where would you advise them to start? Let's assume they're not as advanced as you. They're not building agents. They haven't really taken advantage of educating their folks around what AI is possible. There's a lot of places to start. There's experimenting with prototypes. Everybody goes and does their own thing in the organization, does shadow, I call it shadow AI instead of shadow IT. They're just unofficially using ChatGPT and sharing company information in it, or,
Right. Right.
they're doing things in their private accounts, and there's no structure yet, and they need help. There's a lot of businesses out there from small to large that may not have the resources to really start and think about, how do we get on this AI journey, or, without kind of wasting money, and we want to make sure we get ROI. So there's the balance of experimentation versus I need some kind of return on my investment and my time spent.
Yeah.
What's the one thing they should start thinking about initially? Is it literacy? Is it culture change? Is it guardrails? Is it, where do you start?
I do think you need to start with having a yes attitude. Hopefully that doesn't, I'm not like, totally sidestepping your question, right? Because it's like, is there ROI there? Is this there? It's yes. You just got to, you need to have someone who is able to carve out some space to like get their head around this and start tackling it. Um, with a little bit of faith that the ROI is there. And there's a reason why, everybody's talking about it. Especially if that person again is capable and able to find the headspace to really understand these tools. You don't want to just outsource this. It's like it's really easy to again find a few vendors, but you want to find vendors that allow you to build rather than immediately try and solve your problem. Because the value of AI is that it does mold, right? It reacts. And so you want something that reacts to you and your organization and your needs, not just tries to solve it for everybody. One other thing, I'll quote a friend, David Caswell, who I just saw. He's an AI leader again in the media space. And he recently told me, a metaphor that he uses is this is like success here requires momentum the way a bike does, right? If you're on a bicycle and you stop pedal, if you slow down, eventually, you lose your ability to continue. And the rate of change is only going to increase. And so your ability to maintain momentum I think is important. And so again, getting off of zero is really important. I'm not saying you need to jump and like, there's a lot of buzzwords and there's a lot of hype. You don't need to do that. Even just starting with some custom GPTs. Like if you can't find value in just having a $20 a month or whatever it starts at and some custom GPTs for you and your business, again, there is I hear the thing about, guardrails and stuff like that, but like none of it, to me at least, none of that matters if you're not bought, if you're not sold on the value, right? Because you'll just stop using it and like, okay, well, maybe for a month I shared more than I should have in a custom GPT, but now I'm over it and I'm done. I don't think that'll be the case. Rather, you'll be like, oh, this is valuable. I need to double down. And then you talk about the guardrails and things like that. I mean, another mantra that I sometimes have when it comes to building new things and leadership when I can, and this is partly my unique role, is it's not a problem until it's a problem. You don't want to start solving problems that don't exist yet, right? Go for the solution, to your immediate needs. Don't start thinking about all the other things that this might mess up or do. Right? See the path of least resistance. What's the path forward? If problems arise, you'll solve them. That would be my honest advice.
No, it's great advice. It goes back to the human side of things, right? It's having the right mindset, having an openness to experiment, to innovate continuously. And there's no like implement AI and you're done. Like you actually
No,
have to
it
just
never
keep
ends.
going. It never ends. So, yeah. So that, yeah, it's great to hear that you've developed, wow, 500 plus agents. That's incredible. I think you're probably next time we talk, you're probably up to, 1,000 agents. Who knows? It's
We'll see.
continual improvement, right?
I'm just saying it's even creating those agents is getting faster and easier.
Yeah, I was having a conversation this morning about actually talking to Mind Studio, which I think you do a lot of work with on their platform as well, about how you just using different commands within the AI to help you create more of those agents. So it's really impressive what things are happening so quickly. If you're not sure how to use AI, ask AI. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. I really appreciate the conversation. Really insightful. And I think every leader out there who is thinking about where to start, you've given some practical tips there. And I think having the right mindset, being innovative, just experiment, just start doing it, start using it. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.